I've got two lessons that I learned early on in my leadership career as a branch manager, and then carrying it through as an executive, and then certainly passing it on to my coaching clients. I want to pass on to you. And then I want to leave you with some framework that can support you as a team leader, broker owner, as you look at constantly growing your organization. And then finally, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, an opportunity for you to join myself and Nick McLean for a 1 hour free Zoom educational where we take you deeper into this framework. So let me start with the two principles that I learned. It is John Cheplack coming to you constantly from a place of contribution, and probably even more so as we shift from a marketplace that we were in to the marketplace that we are in today and beyond. And it's exciting times because in 34 years, I've been through all the different marketplaces. And the one thing that I know is it's just staying out in front and keeping our emotions out of it. But that's for a whole other video. Here are the two principles that I have learned. Number one, agents leave you based on the way they joined you. Agents leave you based on the way that they joined you. Now, there may be some of you that are watching this video and thinking, well, they were this, or they were this, or they were that. And when we look at things that way, what happens is we're eliminating the most critical principle in leadership of personal responsibility. Okay. So number one, agents leave you based on the way they joined you. Number two, agents' productivity is based on the way that you brought them on, the way that they joined you. And let me define that. How clear are you being in expectations? Number one. How clear are you being in expectations? See, the recruiting, agent attraction game, whatever you want to call it, the bottom line is bringing agents onto your organization. There is an element of a sales process. There's a prospecting, there is a presenting, there is a lead follow-up, and then there is a conversion and someone joins you. And what can happen is we can tend to, in a highly competitive environment, to bring quality agents onto our organization, is we can tilt a little bit too far to the sales side of things. And what happens is when we tilt too far to the sales side of things, we lose the grit of the expectations that come along with people joining us. And so eventually, some of the expectations that you will be communicating, having meetings about, coaching agents through that had joined you 30, 60, 90 days ago, will be like, well, wait a minute, this wasn't what we talked about before. Everything was great and only going to be better, and we're the greatest and have the greatest, and all those type of things. And it's natural for us to do that. And so I think now more than ever, you must be crystal clear in your expectations. You must absolutely be crystal clear in your expectations. So now let's take a look at some framework. We've talked about the two principles. Let's look at the framework. I think the number one breakdown then that happens is, you take a look underneath this thing of how we're bringing agents on and how we're recruiting them. One message. Write that down. One message. You can look at some organizations in their onboarding process, and there's so many voices that are involved in it, so many steps along the way, from maybe it's someone that makes that initial call. Maybe it's that initial marketing piece. That starts the expectations. A lot of people don't realize this, but you are dictating how the relationship will go long-term based on the marketing messaging out there. It's partly that, but then it's also how you lead them when they do join you. So number two, who's making the calls? In a lot of situations, and what is said on the phone. In a lot of situations, maybe you have a caller who's then scheduling appointments and then someone interviews them. There can be a fracture, a disconnect in what someone says on the phone versus what someone says in the interview. Sure, you may still get them through the interview, but there can be a breakdown there. And so then you take a look at, great, we've hired them, and then there's onboarding. And so you look at all the different voices, and not only the voices, but what is communicated. Are those people, I think the simplest way to look at your onboarding process is it based in principles and values, principles and values? supporting the overarching mission and vision. Like undeniable. What I would do if I'm a team leader, broker owner, manager, I would sit with everyone that's involved in the prospecting, the marketing, the interviewing, the hiring, the onboarding, and the training. And I would get everyone in a room and be crystal clear on everyone's steps along the way. Don't just assign them their steps. Okay, I'm going to meet with this person and tell them what they do in the onboarding. There needs to be a galvanized, crystal clear message, a congruency along the way that the agent is hearing as they join your organization. Because ultimately, what happens is relationships don't end, personal or professional. In this case, we're talking about a business relationship. They don't end based on something that happens in the relationships. They end or fracture based on unmet expectations. Remember that. Things don't go south typically based on what happens. It's based on an unmet expectation. Okay. What happens is just a catalyst that takes you back to, okay, the expectations don't map to what is taking place. And that's why a lot of times in the interview, all the time I suggest you let people know that we have dysfunction. In the onboarding, you let people know we do have dysfunction. In the training, we let people know we do have dysfunction. So let me kind of put a bow on that. The person that is putting the marketing out there, that messaging needs to be congruent with who you are, what you do, and what you stand for. The person on the phone needs to have that same messaging that's congruent. The person interviewing, the person onboarding, the person training them. And then what you have probably, you look at all these steps, and this may not be your process. It is for many of the large organizations I work with. Then that person starts a relationship with a sales manager. So take a look at all of the voices and the messaging. Be crystal clear on your messaging. I'll share a couple things that you may not like and you may disagree with, but I'd ask you to stay in a place of curiosity and identification versus judgment. Okay? Hire fast, get them active fast, let them go fast. Now, I'm not saying just go grab anyone off the street and just hire them. Use your responsible discernment in the hiring process. But I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been able to predict who's going to be productive? No. You might be someone, and I'm not saying it's wrong, that in your, I would call it thought leader videos, thought leader marketing that you're doing out there to other agents, talk about the numbers of 80% of agents fail in the first 5 years in the business. This is called normal and natural. So, you know, what I looked at, and I get to see behind the curtain of organizations today. So I've got the benefit of two things. Actually being an operator that lived and operated in these principles and delivered a very massive result repeatedly. That's why I get to do the work that I do today. And now as a coach, I get to see behind the curtain and I get to watch people do this hiring process. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm going to share with you the contrast, okay, of the process and then the outcome. The ultimate outcome is the people I work with get really, really good results, okay? But you take a look at the time in a hurdle-a-thon type of interview process, right? You know, 3 personality tests, interview with 75 people, exaggerating, okay? Look at all the time exhausted to decide to or not to hire someone. And then there's, in many cases, a one-step. You'd be shocked at how many people do a one-step, maybe 2-step max interview, no personality test. And guess what? I've watched time and again the person that doesn't spend all of this time in interviewing and inspecting, okay? They're spending about this much time. So they're saving time, the most valuable commodity that leadership has, okay, your staff has, okay, to get the same outcome as the person that's so proud of this big, long, drawn-out hiring process. I know because I've had people reach out to me that were coaching with other organizations from or coaching with another coach, with all due respect to them, but they were given this long drawn out process. Said, hey, something, is this right? It just seems like it's going on and on and on. And I've looked at it both ways. I said, well, you are right. No one can predict who's going to be productive. My interview process is really, really simple. I'm looking for 3 simple things, okay? I'm looking for personal responsibility. I'm looking for grit. And I'm looking for someone who's willing to be held accountable. I mean, you can give me a list of a whole bunch of other things, but what I've found in my career operating, what I've found in my business career of consulting and coaching, it works out just fine. So the final piece in some framework, though, that you've got to keep in mind, I guess I would say more of an overarching perspective, is keep your emotions out of it. Keep your emotions out of it. It's tough when you hear people's story and they share with you their dreams, hopes, and desires, and your staff, and you put all this effort into bringing someone on, and then they're not productive, and then the pain of having to have those painful conversations with them. Move towards the painful conversations quickly. I have clients that in day 2 or day 3, and I'm not saying something obnoxious happens, but I'm just saying something that is not congruent with the expectations of the work that needs to be done, and was covered in the interview process and in onboarding before maybe they got into a boot camp. People letting agents go day 2 or day 3. Finding out that there's a lack of alignment in the principles and the values that would support the mission, the vision of the organization. See, the longer you keep people around that aren't going to be productive, the more you dilute the productivity environment that you're striving for, and you wonder why. You wonder why you're not growing and others are. And I can tell you this, in whatever size business you have, but if you look at some of the larger businesses, I think the biggest thing that moves them the most is emotional maturity and emotional intelligence. And that's that ability to have a framework around principles and values that support the mission and the vision, and then being non-negotiable on them, being absolutely non-negotiable, okay? So, have one voice that's congruent throughout the marketing, the recruiting, the onboarding, the training, and then also in the driving of sales by the sales manager. Super, super important. So hope you found those helpful. They are really super simple. I think we can overcomplicate things. And what I know is a couple things is the simple solves the complex. And tiny hinges do swing big doors, because unfortunate to sit every day, I will be going on calls today with people that are swinging big doors wide open in the growth of their business, regardless of market condition. And finally, join us today at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with elite team leader and Chet Black Live coach Nick McLean, where we're going to dive deeper for an hour into this onboarding and expectations, especially right now in a time where things are changing. Hope you have a great day.